next speaker is Nicolina Nielsen from University of Copenhagen, and we will hear something about ion mobility separations.
Hi. Okay, I have to share this, I think. Okay. So I'm going to tell a little bit about profiling of secondary metabolites in shear, primarily phenolics, by use of comprehensive reverse phase, helic, ion mobility, and then high-res MS. So maybe you know shear, maybe you don't, but it is in a lot of the chocolate we eat and in vegan products. It's a fat crop, cosmetics, and currently the demand is a lot higher than the supply. And traditionally, we know shear in West Africa as a butter that is used for food or skincare or for medicinal purposes. And if we look at a little bit at the supply chain, then shear comes from the shear tree. And it's native to sub-Saharan Africa, distributed across 5,000 kilometers. And there's estimated to be around 2 billion shear trees, and actually around 18 million women live from these shear nuts. So this is a fly-in over Ghana. And you can see all the green dots, they're just shear trees. So these shear kernels, they are collected from wild-growing trees, and then they're processed before they're either sold or used. And it's thought that for every unit we produce, we capture a little bit more in CO2 equivalents. So it's a quite sustainable type of crop. It's not a crop because it's wild-growing. And a very sustainable alternative to palm oil. So it is a super attractive commodity. We have had a larger research project on shear, and primarily to link traditional quality markers like the content of the triglycerides and the free fatty acids and the oil extractability from the kernel, but also to map secondary metabolites with potential benefits that we can convey to shear products or even recover from waste streams in the supply chain. And shear was recently shown to contain really high levels of phenolics, so it's like green tea that we often associate with health benefits. And therefore we wanted to profile secondary metabolites and these phenolics in shear and in the nut shells. And because we are analytical chemists, right, then we wanted to do it with a comprehensive setup, really previously shown to be really efficient for phenolics. So you can do reverse phase helic if you want a high sensitivity neural analysis, or you can do helic reverse phase if you want a really high resolving power. And then we linked it with the cyclic ion mobility, and then a QTOF separation in this data-independent acquisition strategy if you want to profile whole samples. So there was one reverse phase, one-dimensional separation done, optimized just to have a nice use of the separation space using this predictive kinetic optimization tool from André and Margrethe Müller. And then we did also two-dimensional separation with a slow reverse phase first dimension, and then a faster helic second dimension. And I don't know, then it's done with loop modulation in either 18 or 24 seconds. And we teed in before the loops a dilution flow to have a little bit more flexibility in the modulation. And then the first dimension was really slow. You can see with 13 or 14 microliters per minute. And also the dwell volume of the first dimension system was minimized by going outside the mixer. So just teeing in A and B in a T piece. Yeah. And then the detection was done in this type of instrument, where we used a non-target strategy, so try to record as much as possible all at the same time with the two quadrupoles here. So the first one, oh, that was the wrong one. The first quadrupole here separates ions according to their mass to charge, but in a chromatographically time domain, they still arrive in the IMS at the same time. And then here in the transfer cell, we then can do low collision energy for no fragmentation, or high collision energy, where we fragment everything that arrives at the same time. And usually when you do this data-independent acquisition, your MS2 and MS1 spectra, they're really messy, because everything arrives at the same time from the first quadrupole. So they don't look nice and clean. And we hope then that by using just a single pass cyclic ion mobility separation here, the precursor ions would arrive a little bit at a different time to the collision cell, and then we would have nice data-independent acquisition MS1 and MS2 spectra. But also another challenge is that when we do this 2D separation, we really have to do a fast data pickup. So you can use maybe scan times of 0.1 second for the mass spec. And that also means that we don't have a lot of time for doing this cyclic ion mobility separation. So we had to do with just a single pass. So it's like a cyclic racetrack where you can choose to do one or several passes, and in this case, we just did a single one. So actually the expectations to separate small molecules in the cyclic IMS, it was not high, right? We don't expect that we can separate small molecules that well from each other, but let's see. So the data looks like this, that you have your first dimension retention time here, reverse phase. Then you have your second dimension retention time, helic. Then you have your arrival time distribution, in this case around 200 bins. And then you have all the exact masses that are picked up by the time of flight. And the number here depends a little bit on the number of ions striking the detector and also on the electronic noise. So it's a high number. And then you have the same for the high collision energy trace. And these two four-dimensional sets, they are actually intertwined, right? So every second scan is a low collision energy scan, and every second is a high collision energy scan. So one sample is 13 gigabytes. And I don't know if you're used to toggling data that size, but it's not nice. So what Oscar did, who's the PhD student on this project, is that he massaged the data a little bit by removing them between different softwares and computing environments, doing some centroiding, and then also doing regions of interest, so detecting all kinds of curvature in data within a certain ppm deviation for the mass spec, and then throwing out everything else. So then you can reduce the size of a sample to 90 megabytes, and then you're good to go. Yeah, and I briefly mentioned this, that DIA mass spectra, they generally look like crap. So you can do different kinds of things to fix that. You can do curve resolution or mathematical chromatography. And here's just one example, right, where we have the raw mass spectrum in blue, and then after curve resolution in black, so it looks nicer. Or, come on, or maybe it's the wrong button. You can also add another chromatographic dimension to the separation, and then of course they also look better. So on the top you have a one-dimensional separation, and then the mass spec from a peak, and in the bottom, a two-dimensional separation. So all these things really improve the spectral purity of your compounds. And then we wanted to see what can this cyclic IMS do. And it's a super cool instrument, right? But the only thing you can do with the instrument software is extract spectra like this. So this is an MS1 scan from the instrument software, and this is an MS1 scan when we go into the data and pull out the arrival time resolved spectra. So the problem is that even though the instrument is super good, you can't access that high resolved data because this instrument software, at least, it collapses either one chromatographic dimension or one arrival time dimension before it extracts the mass spectra. So data is actually in there, and they're really, really good, but whatever you see, it's just crap. So by doing this massaging and moving data around and accessing the really highly resolved data, you can see that what I can get out of MassLynx is this, but what I can get out of OSCAR is this. And the same for the MS2 spectra, right? They also look so crowded, and the tallest peak here, it's an artifact. It's not part of this compound. And then the MS2 spectra from OSCAR. So looks really nice. So even this single pass cyclic IMS, it's super, super useful because we get these precursor ions separated before we do the fragmentation. And at the same time, instrument software, it's crazy, right? It has been like this for years and years, that the instruments are super good, but we can't access the data. So if we keep this fully resolved data with the chromatography and the arrival time resolved data, then the spectra, they look just as clean as data-dependent acquisition. Okay, so OSCAR, he built this customized tool for processing these four-dimensional data. So for example, what you can do is you put in your exact mass that you want to see, the extracted ion chromatogram of that, and then you plot it like this. You pull the cursor and you can see what is the retention time in first and second dimension. You click it and you get the arrival time distributions and the mass spectra for MS1 and MS2, and it's exactly this point. And then you can also choose a specific arrival time here and a specific mass, and then you get the clean spectra out for MS1 and 2. So using this very simple plotting tool, we inspected data. Okay, and this is the 2D chromatogram of shear. And what you can really see is a nice group type separation. So everything color-coded here is different chemical classes from primarily the flavonoids. And you can really see how systematic it is with the flavonols down here. And we have a super nice, of course, hydrophobicity separation in the first dimension, but extremely efficient diastereomeric separation. And then in the second dimension, you can see addition of an extra hydroxyl group. You can see polymerization. So here we have the monomers, some of the dimers up here. And you can even see if the hydroxyl groups are sitting on the A-glycone or on the sugar moiety. Then you also have quite significant shifts. And what you should also maybe make a note of is that the active space in the second dimension here is 13 seconds. And here we have 50 metabolites resolved. And then there was something that we couldn't resolve. So it's also nice to have your good 1D separation in place because, for example, epicatechin gallate and catechin gallate, they're quite nicely resolved in the 1D system, but they overlap in the 2D. And that is primarily due to this remixing that we have in the modulator. We also had quite significant peak broadening for that simple reason that the 2D LC system was 1 meter away from the mass spec. So you shouldn't do that. Yeah, it was nice to have this additional 1D data. And then if we look at the proanthocyanidins, they have not been identified in shear before. But if we take a small square of the 2D space, we can see the procyanidins 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then as we move to higher retention times, we also see the gallulated form and the digallulated forms. And the same with different types of monomers. So when the monomeric units in the dimers become heavier, they move to lower and lower reverse phase retention time and higher helix. So it's very systematic, and you can also see the gallulated forms of these different types of dimers. And then we use the collisional cross-sections as confirmatory evidence, and you can really see a nice correlation here between the mass and then the collisional cross-sections of everything we identified. As I said before, it's not super efficient for resolving isobaric molecules, but some special cases, actually, it could resolve quite efficiently, for example, quercetin and ellagic acid, because ellagic acid has a very condensed structure. So they are almost isobaric, but they are separated in this single-pass IMS. And then we tried to match against the database CCS values, and our calibration has an error of 3%, so that is like the inherent variation in the data. And if we match against either experimental values from all CCS database, then that error is the same. So quite a good match to experimental CCS values. And if we match to predicted ones, the error is larger. So predicted CCS values, even though they are claimed to be extremely good, they carry a lot more variation than the experimental ones. Yeah. And then we compared these 50 metabolites between shear nutshells that are actually not used for anything today. They're just firewood or waste. And then shear kernels that are exported in large quantities to industrialized countries and refined. And we can really see that there's a distinct distribution of metabolites. So some of the metabolites are a lot more abundant in shear shells, and some are a lot more abundant in shear kernels. And for example, these flavanthriols and the proanthocyanidins, they have a range of beneficial properties, right? Antioxidants primarily, but they are also claimed to be cardio, neuroprotective, immunomodulatory, all kinds of crazy things, right? So maybe it's really, really nice if we can functionalize our shear product by claiming actually how much of these compounds are in there. And then quercetin species, also renowned for beneficial properties. It's really crazy high in the shells. So you could also consider to exploit that and not consider it only as a waste product. Yeah. So we separated these samples in 4 dimensions. And we had to make our own customized data processing tool to access this fully resolved data. And even a single pass cyclic IMS improves these data independent acquisition mass spectra, so super efficient for that, even though not so good at separating small molecules. But in certain cases, in very special cases, we actually saw a good separation even for isobars. And then CCS values are extremely valuable in identification work, especially if you can access experimental database values. And then we identify these 50 metabolites in shear, and many of them actually for the first time. It's a really underexplored natural product. Maybe it's not because we are super good, but mainly because not so many people worked with it before. And just to acknowledge, so André, of course, for hosting Oscar for 3 months. And then we have Romina, who has done her thesis on phenolics in shear. Oscar, who's a PhD on 2DLC. Some of the PIs, Tora and Jan. And then Ella in Burkina Faso. And as a last slide, maybe just, we spent 10 years trying to get funding for a 2D commercial instrument. Now we finally got it. But here you see Oscar rolling a 2D system across the highway in Stellenbosch. So that is a brave thing to do. And if you want to have a look at some more of the data processing work, then Oscar has a talk and Nadine has a poster. Oh, and that was not for you. So questions are welcome, but I don't know if time allows.
Let's again just take one question while we're switching.